and altered their product to fit the needs of that distributor. And what was the result? They have a steady flow of volunteers to help facilitate the projects. They no longer spend an inordinate amount of time on marketing and fundraising. And as a bonus in this situation, most of the large tour operators have their own nonprofit that looks to support conservation and community development projects. And Planetara, GAP's nonprofit, was able to adopt this program as one of their projects, and it fundraises throughout the year for the project. So, back out to another part of the world, a little closer to where we are. This is the island of Koprathong in the Andaman Sea. A little different situation. This is a tsunami-affected community, series of communities in the Andaman Islands, but this specific one has a little different situation. They had a very astute and just actually incredibly bright expat, Bodhi Garrett, who you can see in the one image, who runs a small nonprofit, and he actually understood the need to partner with a large nonprofit or a large private sector partner in order to realize his vision of helping the local communities conserve their local environment, again, not turn to extractive types of activities, and be able to receive visitors in a very low impact way. So he designed his products in collaboration with one of the largest travel agent chains in the world. And now he also does not worry about marketing or fundraising. He has a $1 billion company doing it for him. Distribution and awareness through STA Travel, based in the UK, as I'm sure most of you have heard of them, a couple $1 billion company. And also, as part of that partnership, STA Travel committed to a $120,000 fundraising campaign. And obviously, STA is extremely motivated to talk about this project throughout all of their marketing and distribution, because for the obvious credibility benefits it has with their young market. Okay. So as you saw there's a great disconnect. What I would say is there's a huge problem with, as private sector attempts to work with public sector. And it's the build it and they will come problem is what I call it, the great disconnect. This is a normal process of developing a project, taking inventory, getting some advice, a master plan, putting together financial assistance, product and infrastructure, put your products together, and then go out and find your distribution channels. I would posit that, if I could change the slide, that's exactly the wrong way. This is the kind of project you're going to end up with taking that tack, abandoned project. So what I'm proposing is the end of the great disconnect. Put market forces to work. Those are the examples I was giving you, putting the market forces to work. So how do you do that? You start with your business goals, and you need to understand what that conservation or what that community project business goals are, and you need to understand how they align with a potential private sector partner. Distribution channels must be involved at this stage, not the last stage that you saw. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, number 1. This is how the order must proceed. Tell the story. This is talking about communication. Tell the story. So here's a beautiful place. Please. That's a beautiful place. That's beautifully conserved environment in the background. But this by itself will not attract anyone. No one understands, no one is going to be motivated to go to a place just because it's beautiful. There's lots of beautiful places around the world. What you have to do is tell the story. Tell the story around that place. Find out what the indigenous story is. Find out what the story of the local lodge owner who overcame incredible difficulties to build his lodge is. Find the story of the wildlife and the native species that might be endangered, or interesting facts about those species. Wrap that story around this beautiful place, and then you have a product. So private sector partnerships bring solutions. Here it is. Markets are difficult to find. So the solution is involve operators and retailers. I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, I'll warn you. Retailers from the start, and understand what products will find markets. Work with those distributors. They already know. They probably just need a little bit of a tweak, a little bit of an adjustment in order to your product in order to make it market ready. Conservation project marketing budgets and low marketing expertise prevent market access. These are conservationists, they're biologists, they're not marketers. Why not use the access to these high-powered marketing experts to get the word out about your project, help them, or have them do the talking for you? You create the story, you help them create the story, you gather the story, but why would you spend the millions of dollars a year they spend, millions and millions and millions of dollars a year they spend getting the word out to the public, to the traveler? And finally, as I mentioned before, build it and they will come doesn't work. So involve those distribution partners. I think I mentioned that. Involve those distribution partners in every phase, every phase of the project's life cycle, and that will help you to create necessarily a competitive advantage for your conservation project. It will, the needs of the market, the needs of the distributor will align with your project and allow you to create something that is different, distinct, and appeals to the traveler. And I think I went over, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I keep calling him Peter, I don't know why. Thank you, Richard. You've done just fine. Our next speaker is Manuel Lee Jung, who works for the GIZ sector project, Tourism and Sustainable Development. He's based in Aishon. Manuel has a specialization in social anthropology, history, and politics, and he developed his master's thesis on tourism development in South Africa's Wild Coast. And today he will speak to us on behalf of his colleague from the same office, talking about the last 20 years learned in tourism development for conservation. Manuel, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Is it on? Thank you very much, Deirdre. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak here. Dear ministers, ambassadors, chairmen, and colleagues. Talking about 20 years, obviously, of experience is a title that my colleague came up with. 20 years ago, I personally was about 10 years old. So this is already getting ahead of me. I'm obviously reflecting on the knowledge management that my institution, the GIZ, has gained. The GIZ is the implementing organization of the BMZ, which is the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany. We are the sector project that is mainly tasked with advising all the projects that are happening all over the world, from our headquarters in Eschborn, not Eichhorn, actually, Eschborn. Eichhorn is, in German means squirrel, actually. It's very interesting. Our main task is actually to advise the federal ministry and then advise the projects all over the world, and then also develop new concepts. So, talking about 20 years of experience, I want to even go back further. And looking at this book that came out 40 years ago by a Swiss geographer, And its German title says The Eaters of Landscapes. And this book was about the tourism developments taking place in the Mediterranean and the Alps in the 1970s. And if you look at this book, there are many of the discussions that we're having today that were already formulated back then. The problems of runaway tourism development, uncontrollable, ruining ecosystems, and going way ahead of carrying capacity. Today we're having a lot of, we always, in this very important job that for instance the WTTC does, is to convince governments that tourism plays a huge role, in economic development, and especially in its growth is very significant. However, one line that I borrowed from Mitchell and Ashley of the ODI that I think is very good to look at is, it's, asking how much did tourism contribute is interesting, but does not necessarily address the difficult question of, was it actually worth it? So you always, when you talk about tourism development, have to assess the feasibility in terms of its sustainability, its ecological costs, but also the opportunity costs. You can always, when you have tourism development, you can also decide not to engage in it. You have to assess this, in the first place. And sometimes it makes sense to say, no, we don't need to develop tourism here. There are other options. But then you have to see what those other options would entail. And most of the time, farming activities or extractive industries obviously do greater harm to the environment than tourism does. So we were asked to name a few challenges. Obviously, there could be many more than the ones that I wrote up here. Okay, the first one. Looking at the context where tourism developments actually take place, looking at the destination, what is hardly ever talked about is the frameworks where it takes place. In many cases, we have huge problems with land tenure, with a problem of having proper laws and regulations and spatial planning and implementation. And this goes both ways. If those are not properly managed, and if there are laws and regulations, it can still happen that they are so strong that they actually inhibit tourism development. So this is a very important case to study. Like I think has been made clear, we are especially advising on development issues in developing countries, and there's only 10% of the land parcels in developing countries have been registered, and about 30% in Latin America and only 1% in Africa. And when you start the tourism development, first looking at destinations, you have to see what are the rules of the game on the land that you're developing, and this is already where the problem starts. And this is not only developing countries. One of the main problems that Greece has right now is also that they don't have proper land registries, and that is a problem for their tourism industry. Economic sustainability, like Richard has expressed very clearly, a lot of the tourism developments that have been taken place, especially those that were developed by NGOs or by government donors, lacked market access, and this is one of the economic factors that have not been looked at properly, and then also the volatility, obviously, of the tourism industry. When you develop destinations, you have to take care that it doesn't go upwards and down. It's all, at least, you cannot always control it, but you need to find ways to work against that and have them make them more sustainable in that way. One of the ways that you can do that is the product quality and the diversification that especially in developing countries has to be increased if they want to be able to be competitive on a global scale. And then the next challenges that I want to briefly go into is the socio-ecological sustainability. I've added those two terms intentionally, me being a social anthropologist, and I think it's very important, and that is actually what green economy should be about, that especially in rural developing areas, the environment and the economy are not separable, and you have to always consider those two together, and this is especially true in tourism development. When you look at protected areas, for example, human-wildlife relations, or usually called human-wildlife conflicts, are one of the examples that you can pass for that. So those are some of the challenges that I chose for this venue. Just as an example, the Masai Mara is, a very famous destination. If you combine it with the Serengeti Masai Mara ecosystem, it contributes a lot to the Kenyan tourism economy, as you can see down here. But obviously, when you talk about linking conservation and tourism, the Masai Mara is only one small part of Kenya. What about all those other areas? Are they actually, setting in value all all what the country has in tourism? No, they're not. And actually, Masai Mara is actually way beyond carrying capacity. At least it was before they had their downfall in 2007. So what has to be done is to actually look at diversifying, like I said earlier, diversifying the tourism economy in Kenya. But still, even in places like the Masai Mara, there's very good examples of private sector projects like the And Beyond camp here, where you can actually see this has been developed hardly with any interference from donors or from NGOs, only some charities that came in later on, and you can see they have a very strong pro-poor impact in an area which is in some areas overdeveloped in terms of tourism. But how do they look at the money that it costs to stay there actually? And then there's other examples, like I said, in Kenya. What about the other areas, like other national parks, like the Nairobi National Park? There you have, the blue part that you can see up there is a very small area of a huge ecosystem, and it's about only 20% of the animal migrations, that is going from Nairobi National Park all the way down to Amboseli, and this is was a very good, I'm just saying about the UNWTO STEP initiative, mainly funded by Korea. Very great initiative, Korea has shown a lot of leadership in it. But what I'm going to say about my organization later on too is a lot of the tourism projects, they've just, have been very ambitious, but like this one has not addressed the big picture, because the big picture is that around Nairobi there's huge, real estate development going on, land is taken away, and both people and animals are just driven and cornered in by developments that are taking place. And the corridor that you can see on that map is actually getting narrower and narrower. Okay, I continue with this one. Currently, there's about 60 tourism project components in German Development Corporation. And we are in contact with most of them, spread all over the world. And what you can see is a similar situation as the problem that I've just described. They just don't address the big pictures, the challenges that I said earlier. So when you're looking at developing tourism projects for the future, you have to start at the big constraints, the big political constraints, the big economic constraints. I'm not saying you always have to only work at the top, but you have to also look at the destinations where it takes place. But without it, you never reach where you want to get to. This is an example of thinking beyond what was common thought back then, actually including trophy hunting into protected area management. GIZ has had a project here in Benin for several years. There was another example in the Selous in Tanzania, where it's been shown that it's actually a brochure that came out that was called "Use It or Lose It." I'm not really a big fan of hunting, but when you actually have to decide between poaching or and losing the wildlife, or having a controlled trophy hunting. This project has been very innovative in the 90s and the early 2000s, to actually including the community and benefiting from trophy hunting. 5 minutes, all right. This is another project that is currently being started. The Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area. It's the biggest conservation area that's ever been planned. It's about the size of Sweden. 450,000 square kilometers. It's been mainly funded by KfW, which is the financial assistance institution of the German government, and several other donors that you can see, but it's mainly run through SADC. So what they're going to be, as you can see on the map, it's across 5 different countries in Southern Africa, and what they're trying to do is, linking tourism development with conservation, but all the other economic activities that are taking place on the ground, mainly subsistence-based agriculture and fishing and all of that. So, I think they have a budget of about 20 million, which is, a huge budget for a tourism development project, at least from a German perspective. And this contract was just signed last year in Berlin, and it was signed by the 5 tourism ministers of those 3 countries. And they wanted to actually make a point by signing this transboundary project in Berlin, where the Berlin conference took place, that actually separated up Africa in the late 19th century. And those African leaders are showing incredible leadership, I think. And I'm very looking forward to what this project is going. It's going to be huge challenges, but it's very interesting. Just follow up on what is going on there. So I've just formulated a question here to go to the recommendations, and then I'll be done. What does it take to change a ruinous diet from feeding off landscapes? So that's the title of that book, Landschaftsfresser. To sharing access and benefits from natural capital and ecosystem services. I'm here using a buzzword, obviously, access and benefit sharing, which doesn't relate to tourism, but should. If you look at the mechanisms of that protocol, Nagoya Protocol, and of the IBS, how it works, why is the tourism discussion not going into that direction? I mean, there's many, examples where this has worked, this kind of sharing access and benefits with local communities and the tourism industry, but it's never entered any convention on the international scale. But it has to if you want to get that problem across and those issues resolved. Okay, finally, the recommendations. Those are based mainly on destination development. Looking at a destination, it's very important that all the actors engaged in it have to come together and have to actually understand the tourism industry. That means all the suppliers, all the civil society groups, everybody that has a stake in tourism. And most people do, because tourism is taking place where they live. So destination, those what you see in black as in bold letters is actually all instruments, or would say that recommendations of German Development Cooperation. I guess they're not labels, but this is what we're doing. Destination-based, multi-stakeholder approach towards institution building and capacity development. This can mean destination management organizations. This can take many different forms, but it's important to actually have, a destination and the people that live there, both the industry and political actors work together. This, in a national park environment, this can be the park authorities and the tourism department, for example. Hardly ever works together, but it's very important to get them on the side of each other. Otherwise, you have always problems. All destinations depend on their inclusion in international marketing networks. Again, what Richard has been saying, it doesn't make sense to start something, without having the private sector work with you from the beginning. But you have to work with well-chosen private partners, obviously. We have an instrument called Develop, a kind of a public-private partnership system. But it's, we are very careful at choosing who we're working with, because I guess most of you know that, there's an evil twin of the tourism industry, and that's the real estate development. There's so many destinations, especially in developing countries, where there's big promises of tourism development that never takes place. People are just, building concrete all along the coast, for example, and they might not even be interested in developing tourism. All they're doing is laundering money. That's what, a lot of tourism destinations, so-called tourism destinations are about. Never include in international marketing networks. So yeah, work with the private sector, but be careful who you're dealing with. Destinations are the sum of their businesses, their products, and their services. The brand value of a destination is directly linked to the integrity of its ecosystems, its natural capital. Obviously, everybody knows that, when you ruin your landscape, then, you lower your natural capital. But you also have to connect it to your brand value, because you're marketing that destination overseas. Usually you are, or outside of the destination. So, it's not enough to just talk about the natural capital, but also about the brand value of the destination. And finally, we suggest to use an integrated value links approach, so working along the value chain. Value links is one of our instruments towards doing that, toward greening the value chain, in terms of the green economy, linking both the value chain with economic, ecological sound practices like ecological farming and all of that for local products. Okay, that's it, I'm through.
Thank you, Manuel, and we're going to ignore what's written on your agenda in terms of questions and answers, and we'll just delay that until the final speaker makes her presentation, and she is Ariane Janner, who is a technical coordinator of EcoBrasil. Ariane has a background in biology, finance, and marketing, not to mention an MBA. She is the co-founder of EcoBrasil, which started back in 1993, and it's an independent channel for action and information on sustainability in tourism in Brazil and worldwide. And we're to learn from Ariane the Brazilian perspective. Ariane, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Is this on? Yep. 안녕하세요. Okay, I think my presentation will fit very well with what you've heard before. I agree with my previous speakers. And I will now talk a little bit about Brazil. I will give you some case studies. I will give you some numbers and challenges and recommendations. Let's see if I can operate this now. Oops, no, it went too far. Okay, oops. Just one. Yes. Okay, let's start first with the big numbers. These are the big numbers of Brazil. In 20 years, what has happened? The population has grown. The GDP per capita has grown even more, so Brazil has become a richer country, and also Brazil is well known for its high income inequality. That has also reduced, not as much as it should have, but it has reduced. If we look at tourism, we can see that foreign visits have more than tripled. I didn't push anything here. But what's much more interesting is that actually domestic tourism, Brazil is a very big country, is much bigger than foreign arrivals, and it has also grown faster, a reflection of that Brazil is getting to be a richer country. Now, if we look at the environment side, we can see that national parks have doubled, basically, and very interesting, private reserves, which are officially recognized in the Brazilian environmental system, have actually grown even more. I didn't push anything. Let's go back. They want me to talk about the case studies. In 92, there was no Ministry of Tourism, but it was actually instated in 2003, which shows that Brazil actually gave much more credit to tourism as a way of developing areas. The Ministry of Environment existed, but at that time the parks were still under the Ministry of Environment. They are now a separate unit. The only unfortunate thing in Brazil is that the Ministry of Environment does not have a very high budget. Its budget has effectively not changed since 2000, and they're basically spending about $1 per hectare of managing their protected areas, which is not a lot. In terms of environmental performance and both tourism, Brazil is kind of medium. It's ranked 30 out of 132 in environmental performance index. And in terms of tourism competitiveness, it's number